Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Long Game, where we demystify the science that shapes our lives and unpack how great ideas built here in Scotland become real world medicines, devices, and companies at the cutting edge of life sciences. I'm Ross Kagan, Regis Professor of Precision Medicine at the University of Glasgow and Director of the McNabb Center for Cancer Innovation.
Hi, I'm Sandy Weir, Tech Innovation Leader and Strategic Program Manager, joining you as usual from Edinburgh, Ross.
Hey, Sandy. Always lovely to see you. Ready you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. I'm really enjoying this amazing spell of weather that we've had that we're experiencing at the moment. How about you, Ross? Are you making most of it?
You know, forgets to be 20 here. I was playing golf the other day with a friend who was 20. And and I was like, "Oh, this is beautiful." And he's like, he could barely move. He's from Scotland. He's like, "This is so hot that I can't handle this." And for those of you who don't understand what 20 is, it's not even 70 degrees for part
It's
two.
been a bit warmer than that. To be fair, it's been like
22. Wow. They shouldn't even allow us outside. So yeah, I am enjoying it.
as a Scot, I feel truly baked in this weather.
I
So
know. The sad thing is I do too. I've been here long enough now. 100%. So, well, Sandy and folks, on the long game, we explore the collision of cells, code, and capital in the Scottish life sciences sector. So, look, last week we gave you the dictionary for investments and your young, budding biotech company. We explained pre-seed, seed, series, like Series A, dilution, valuation. We talked about angels and venture capital. Wow, we actually got through a lot. Today, we're going to talk about an actual map for how to get things up and running and how to get them funded.
yeah, we've spent a bit of time on this, Ross. So thanks for everyone sticking with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, knowing what a seed round is doesn't really help you too much if you don't know whose door to knock on. So that's what we're going to be looking at now. So you've got to understand when you're ready and or when it's simply too early to do so.
Yeah. So I would say this is sort of the practical episode. So if you're a scientist in Glasgow, even in Edinburgh, Dundee, Aberdeen, wherever, do they have scientists in Edinburgh?
You always got to get that out, haven't you?
And you think, I might have the beginnings of a company. What do you actually do? How do you actually fund it?
Yeah, exactly. And how do you avoid giving away too much too early and to the wrong people?
Yeah, so I think we can agree that might be one of the most, if not the most important question.
And it's in part two, we're going to talk through public funding. We're going to look at university support, Scottish enterprise. We mentioned in the last pod angel syndicates. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Accelerators. We'll get the great value of your experience and wisdom on that topic, Ross. We'll look at venture funds, and then at which point you should maybe look beyond Scotland. Hard to
Yeah.
believe, but maybe there's a requirement to do
Well,
that. So
obviously the answer to that is never, right? And I should say, importantly, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm not just speaking as an academic today. I also sit on the other side of the table. I'm Chief Scientific Officer of the P4 Precision Medicine Accelerator Fund. Shout out P4. So I'll talk about what we look for when founders pitch to us, what tells me a company is actually ready. And when I say me, I mean at the P4 team headed by Nathan McNally. And what tells me it's still a research project wearing a company t-shirt.
great expression, Ross. Maybe that should be the title of this episode.
Ooh, I can do that. You would be surprised how common this, let's say the t-shirt walks in the door.
So it's going to be great to lean into some of your awesome experience today, Ross. I'm really looking forward to learn ton of useful stuff from you today. So this episode is not just go raise the money. This is the raise the right money at the right time from the right people, and importantly for the right reasons.
Yeah, and also to know when it's not time to raise money, when you shouldn't raise money at all.
Exactly. So before we get into Scottish Enterprise and Angels, let's maybe take one step back. And you're a researcher, you have an idea in your university lab. Maybe it's a diagnostic, maybe it's a new a drug, a new target drug, maybe it's a medical device. Maybe it's an AI tool for clinical decision making. What's the first mistake they'll make, Ross?
Yeah, the first mistake, and I'm probably guilty of this sometimes as well, is that you form a company too early. So it's easy to forget how great you have it in a university because starting a company is fun and it's kind of cool. Um, and I know a lot of early investors, the first thing they ask me is, "Did you pick a name yet?" And if I picked a name, then they're like, "Yeah, you've gotten too obsessed with this." So you pick your name, you get a deck, you design a logo. And my daughters are really great at designing logos. So I've got all sorts of amazing logos. You get to tell everybody, "Hey, I have a biotech." So this feels like you're doing something that it's progress. But as I mentioned, if you're inside a university, you have something that you're going to actually have to pay for and build a functioning lab. You've got equipment, you've got trained people who are smart, you have institutional support, access to colleagues, so you can have conversations like you and I have. You can get access to patient samples. Red alert, it's very difficult to get hold of patient samples if you're a private entity. You have clinical coordinate collaborators, and basically you can keep pushing that science forward before your clock starts ticking and you have to answer to an investor. So you have a small startup, you don't have any of this, right? You have to build it all from scratch. And incidentally, once you start the company and you take that outside money, that's when that clock starts. The pressure changes. Investors want you to hit their milestones. They want a plan. They want speed. This can be good. And I have to say, starting companies has also changed the way I run my own lab in terms of really focusing on execution. Uh, but the science has to be ready to get ported and it has to have done everything it can do reasonably within the lab.
Yeah, these are great points, Ross. So I think what we're saying is that the first source of funding may not be the investor at all. It's probably more likely to be research grants, translational grants, proof of concept funding, university support, and looking and knocking on the door of the technology transfer office.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Basically, use the university to reduce the risk of your ideas and eventually the company because you don't get brownie points for spinning out too early. There is a point where if you held it too long in the university, first of all, the world will pass you by, your idea gets older, and these sorts of things. So there is a moment when it makes sense. But the most important thing is make sure the biology is reproducible, that it's real, because they're going to want to see more independent data. And while you're in the lab, that's the time to really do that. Show your device works outside of your own hands, give it to others. Show your diagnostic has an actual clinical use case. It's astonishing how rarely my scientist friends actually walk over to a clinician and say, "Hey, you think you'll actually want this?" It's amazing. I actually will do it for them. And very often the clinicians will say, "No, actually, we have no interest in this. We're really busy. We're not going to do this. I don't really care how great you tell me it is." So it's very important to know your customer. So in other words, a company is not the beginning of translation. It's the point where translation needs an actual commercial vehicle. What do you think, Sandy?
Yeah, this is a really important distinction, and I've always thought that the university environment and the ecosystem offers a great opportunity to protect and nurture those fledgling opportunities. This is definitely the upside of university support. Maybe we'll get a chance to consider some of the downside shortly. But enough from me just now. Just tell us a bit more about this exciting new environment when you're getting your company off the ground.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let me say, exciting is probably not the best reason to actually found a company. Um, and as you know, Sandy, I can get pretty excited. So, you have to kind of rein yourself in. It's probably good to have a heat check with a friend. So basically, but as we mentioned, there is a point where it actually begins to make sense. And this, I think, is what separates scientists who are willing to be entrepreneurs from those who prefer to stay back in the lab, which is, of course, completely fine. But you're probably not listening to this podcast. Um, so it should exist. Your company should come into existence because basically your project needs a structure that the university lab cannot provide. Okay, you can't keep having your postdocs working on it. That's not fair, this sort of thing. In other words, you've moved from understanding the science to product development. Maybe you're now actually screening or creating a new lead compound. Maybe you have a device that's cobbled together in bits and bobs, and now it's actually time to manufacture it. Maybe it's time to put in quality systems because now you're starting to think about patients, and you don't want to start dropping these quality systems into your lab. They're very onerous.
Yeah. So
Um,
don't so
yeah.
don't incorporate just because you've got a clever idea, Ross. Incorporate when the idea has a credible route to becoming a product.
Yeah, and don't I can be a nasty critic of university expertise, but actually there are some really sharp people who are members of these teams, and make sure you go and sit down and talk to them. First of all, you're going to need to tell them because if you work at a university, they own what you have. We're going to get back to that,
Yeah.
but keep them in the loop. If you keep them in early, they will be on your side and will be happy about it. But in any case, intellectual property IP really does matter, and they need to sort of follow along as you move forward. So remember, Sandy, if you're going to publish your work, present it, disclose it, or just email it to Ross, okay, before you've protected the IP, before you've filed a patent, you may damage the company before it exists. And let me tell you, lawyers will check later. So there's no point in trying to wish that you didn't. Don't
Yeah.
stand in front of a large group and just show them everything before you nail it down.
Absolutely. And that's really the really sort of first and foremost practical lesson that we want to get over today before the pitch deck, before you sort out ownership. And whilst I remember, you should also need to be careful these days what you ask your favorite large language model. So another consideration.
Actually, that's a good point. There are ways to, in other words, Sandy, what you're talking about is you put all your information in a large language model that goes out to the world. There are ways to set up boundaries in large language models to make it incognito or whatever. That's a really smart point, which I probably often forget about. And I should say, so let's say you're going to go off to a meeting, Sandy, you want to talk about your latest and greatest. Filing a quick provisional patent, especially if you're in a university setting, is not a big deal. It can be done very quickly. It could be something as simple as stapling your draft manuscript and a page saying, "I claim this," and then you just put it in as a marker.
Yeah, indeed.
Um, yeah. Um, yep. So,
But
what do you think, Sandy?
yeah, I mean, I think these are all really, really important pieces of information and really important considerations. But I kind of want to flip it slightly, Ross, because we talked up a lot of the positives of the university environment, but there are some downsides to launching your startup within the university ecosystem. And maybe I'm kind of skirting around the question, but let me be more clear about what I'm meaning. I think universities can have, within that environment, because the university take too much equity for the IP that you're generating. So when academics institutions demand large initial stakes, so 20%, 40%, and 40% wasn't so unusual, particularly a few years ago. That can leave founders with really heavily diluted ownership, making it really difficult to attract the venture capital funding that we're going to talk about shortly, and also make it difficult to afford and retain the talent that you need further down the road. So one of the things I was recalling as, prep for the session we're having today was that I think back in 2023, the UK government launched an independent review of university spinouts. And as a result, there was a strong encouragement off the back of that study that institutions should lower their baseline equity stakes to something more like sort of 10% for IP intensive startups, and maybe even limit to 25%, which I think we both agree is still too much for life sciences, health tech, biotech science startups. So what's your view? I don't want to put you too much on the spot here, but is the balance better now, or how much of this do you think is still an issue, Ross?
I believe your phrase when we were discussing this earlier today was poke the bear.
Poke the bear. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, I have strong feelings. So let me keep it short and let me also be solutions oriented. Okay. I think all these numbers are too high. And let me give you a specific example. So a company that was started under my watch. My watch? It started from our technology. Um, and the deal that was cut with the, we'll say university, actually medical school, was they took 3%, okay? And they took nothing for the first 2 years so that you could actually get that first early money and convince people to hand it over. That was brilliant and allowed the company to take off and nurture itself. And, um, and they were able to really use that as a launch pad. So I would say this. So you want to know a number? I like 3. I think right now 3% is just not going to happen. It's not going to happen in Scotland. It's not going to happen in a lot of places, to be fair. If you're going to demand, so 25% is 20%, that's bananas. And let me explain why. It is not, has nothing to do with you or me being greedy. It has to do with, I go to an investor and I say, give me $100. And they say, well, but $20 of that is just going to go to university and set on fire. Why would I give you any money? Because I know 20% of it's just wasted. This is the problem. Nobody's going to invest in your little company because they see a lot of it just go right out the door. This is why taking nothing at the beginning actually makes sense. The number of companies that will succeed will go up quite a bit and the university will make far more money. So if they're going to take 10%, because they're still not going to listen to Ross, fine, then provide value that I can go to an investor and say, I have free use of your cores, I have free use of whatever. And that's value that's worth more than the 10% that you're going to lose when you give me the money. This I can see, but that has to be very intentional. And that's my little rant. What do you think?
I think that's a great point. I love that demonstrating value for that investment. I think that's really, really important. So I think that is the way to persuade, that the investment community that you're not overly diluting your share back to university. So really well made points, Ross. Thank you very much for that insight. So once you've got a credible project, Scotland does have some serious public support that we can lean into. We talked about this briefly in part 1 of the pod. It's not perfect; it can be complicated, but it does matter. So for many companies, the first conversation will be with Scottish Enterprise, one of our regional enterprise agencies. And historically, programs like Smart Scotland, they've been really important because they provide the support for feasibility studies, for early R&D projects, and helping to create clear commercial endpoints. What do you think, Ross?
Yeah, and just a practical warning. So we are going to put out some specifics, but you need to check because things come and go very quickly. It was very difficult for me to kind of keep track of all of them and whether they're actually funding at this moment. So just when you're building your funding, just have a sit down, have a look. You mentioned large language models are very useful for looking around for you. And yeah, especially if you're listening to this podcast 2 years from now, you may want to update. So
exactly. Check what's live at the time.
Yeah.
Really good point.
Yeah.
But I guess the principle remains. It's really useful non-diluted money, and if you can get it, when you can get it, that's a great opportunity. And if you can answer the sort of key technical questions with the grant fund there, rather than with equity, that's usually good for the founder as well to get those. I guess that early examination.
Yeah, so you're basically with non-dilutive money, you're buying evidence without really selling the company. Actually, you might want to explain what non-dilutive means in this context.
Yeah, I like that, Ross. It buys evidence without, selling the company, as you've said. There's also the difference between, I guess, university stage proof of concept support and company stage funding. So if you're still inside the university and you're looking for proof of concept, and those transformational routes is really key. If the company exists, then Scottish Enterprise may come through with grants offers, or maybe direct you to appropriate funding opportunities, provides advice, provides investor readiness and support, and or equity funding. So really good place to go to.
Yeah, I think this is a really good point. I just want to say a couple of notes. So first of all, bodies like Scottish Enterprise, they're not just a grant body; they actually have experts.
Yeah.
And to that point, my biggest recommendation, and I did this many years ago when I opened the first company back at Washington Medical School, and it was the first, I'm told, drug-related company opened there in 40 years. So this was back in the Stone Age when opening biotechs weren't so common. And what I did was to find others who have started companies and take them out for coffee. And every week I would do one person, and they would explain to me all the stuff that you and I are talking about here, but in more detail. And you start to build a network.
Yeah.
And you know better than I do, Sandy, having this network is super valuable, especially when you're starting to do fundraising. You want to know if we're going to get into angel investors. Are they good idea or bad idea? Turns out others know these people and can weigh in on it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, and I guess that's part of the assistance you can also get from Scottish Enterprise, right? So
Yes.
once you've got those private investors involved, SE can act as that sort of gap funder through those equity-based funds, and Scottish Venture Fund's a really good example, and typically they invest alongside the private money. And they'll so it's not usually the first check on its own. It's not the place to go first, but I think it's really good and really complementary to the private sector. So when the private sector is leading, they can come in and they can help to complete the capital that you'll need for that particular round that you're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to say it sort of clearly, because this is an important point.
It's
No,
a
no,
good
I'm
point.
sorry. That came out wrong.
No, it's all right. It's good.
We'll have to edit that out.
Keep it in.
But of course we won't. No. But to say it, what I meant to say is to say it in another way is that walking into Scottish Enterprise or any of these venture funds without having secured any, we call it friends and family or some equivalent money, they're not going to like that because they want others to have validated you. So when you walk in, you can't just say, well, why don't you give me all the money I need? What you want to say is, here is the private funding that we've lined up. Here is what we need to really accelerate, and why for Scottish Enterprise, why your public co-investment would help this Scottish company grow. That is an argument I think that they would be pretty excited about. In other words, what you're really talking about is pre-validation before you walk in the door. You
Yeah,
agree?
yeah, no, exactly. And of course, the kind of game we're trying to play, what we're trying to achieve here, it's not a game. I guess that's the wrong expression. But what we're trying to achieve here is we're trying to use that public money to help us to crowd in that capital investment. So it's not a substitute. These are complementary. So you got to use both together. You got to know how that works.
Yeah, and one entity I've come across is, what about you would know more about this, the Scottish National Investment Bank?
Yeah, Scottish National Investment Bank. I think we've mentioned this kind of previously on the pod, and I think we described this as the investment bank's been around since around November 2020, and it's mission led. So it's a development bank that's there to provide what we call patient capital. That's the kind of long-term capital. I guess it might be obvious, but it's probably important to make that distinction. And it's really focused at businesses and projects that are established in Scotland. So it was primarily created to address that gap that exists between catalyzing private sector investment and building more fairer, more sustainable economy. So very much it's about the Scottish government and sustaining the strategic plan. So it's not there if you're wanting a sort of 50K check for a two-person academic spin out. the Scottish National Investment Bank would not be the place to go. So please don't go knocking on that door if that's where you're thinking. It's more relevant where you start to scale. So when things start to become strategically important, and that's a much better fit with that bank's mission.
Yeah. So if I can sort of summarize the rough sequence that we're talking about, because we've thrown a lot of bits and bobs in there. So just to put an outline on it. All right, you have a great idea. Let's start from the beginning. You stay in the university. You get your proof of concept first. Make sure that's bulletproof. Then you go and get enterprise support and grants. Then you can, once you have that, that validates you. So you can then go to angels or seed capital. Okay. And that begins the whole thing of co-investment where you get multiple people investing with you. And then eventually you get to, for example, the banks, like where larger institutional capital, it's where the real venture capitalists come in and so on. Does that seem about right, Sandy?
Yeah, I think that's a fairly sort of sensible kind of step through and logical progression. But I guess the important thing is not necessarily the exact sequence. It's being able to use the right source for the right job. So grants are really good where we're trying to de-risk. So where we've got large amounts of technical risk. Angels are really good for early company formation, for networking, for accessing, the types of people that these guys can open you up to and really start to strengthen your proposition. Accelerators are great with, yeah, when you're needing to start to explore the market, understanding regulatory positions and investor readiness, and then that venture capitaling is there for scaling the company. So once you've got and you've been able to demonstrate the potential, and that's when that source of funding becomes really, really valuable.
Yeah, and I guess your point is the flip is if you use the wrong money at the wrong time, that this can be a problem.
I think that's right. I think you're right with that. I think if you go to a venture capitalist round too early, that can set expectations that you might find really, really difficult to meet. I think angel money in the wrong terms can essentially block you for the next round of funding. The perception, well, you've got funding. What have you done with that money
Yeah.
already? What are you able to demonstrate? And then the grant money can unfortunately can help to keep a project alive, but without demonstrating the commercial value, because the grant funding tends to be over like 3 years, sometimes longer than that, and that can sustain something that actually maybe the weaknesses are starting to show, and you don't really have that commercial out, and but you're kind of locked in, and you're not able to pivot. So every source of money has its cost, and even if it doesn't look like dilution, which you explained really well in the previous part.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is that's a really good walkthrough on it. And again, as you say, you don't want to take too much money too early because then you're on the clock. And I've seen this. You've seen this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It can be a fairly uncomfortable position, I think, for those organizations to be in. I guess one of the things we talked about in the last pod, so pivoting slightly and thinking about angel investment, we mentioned that Archangels in Edinburgh, one of the best known syndicates, really strong history of supporting IP-rich technology and life sciences companies in Scotland. So Ross, when is an angel money the right move? Can you expand a little bit on this point?
Yeah, actually, and I think we all see angels in other things where you say, "Oh, Elon Musk invested in this company early on. It was really as an angel," this sort of thing. And that matters because they bring a lot more than just money in an ideal situation. So this is when we get to when angels are great, and I think they can be absolutely company changing if you get the right one. So, at a pre-seed or a seed stage, a good angel or an angel syndicate, which is, a collection of angels, can help a founder make the transition from an academic project, which is what we know very well, to actually a company, which usually angels are people with a lot of business experience. Importantly, they will often recruit the first chair of your board. They can introduce you to the proper lawyers, accountants, clinical advisors, commercial partners, other future investors, very key. Okay, so they'll plug you into that world. Basically, what they do is they can help professionalize the company. And I think a lot of our worries on angel investors come from in the past before they formed these syndicates and they would just sort of wander in. Very often, angels have a personal reason for investing in it. Maybe they have a family member that has disease, but maybe they don't have the experience in helping you make that transition. I think that's actually changed now. I think angels are much more sophisticated. They have ways in themselves to learn how to be an effective angel. And so in the right situations, they can be incredibly valuable.
Mm. And it just dawned on me when you were describing that very, very well, Ross, that, within our network, we know some of these guys, and we should definitely try and bring someone onto the pod and have an interview. I'm sure they'd be open to that, and learning from their experience would be a really sort of valuable contribution in this context as well.
That's a great idea.
And maybe we can also ask them, when is angel money the wrong move?
Well, I think I can help answer that. I have to say I've never had a negative angel. So, we all understand where the issues are. The main problem is if the angel does not understand biotech. So remember we talked about this last time. Biotech is not like software. Okay, you can't put out betas. Timelines are much longer. The risk is very different. Okay. Again, like betas, you can't put it out, get it back, bring it. You have to really cross your T's and dot your I's. So the risk is very different because of regulation. Creating true evidence just takes time. Everything takes time. Clinical trials take time. Manufacturing and quality systems matter, as my wife will often remind me. Reimbursement matters. Okay, who's going to actually pay for all of this if you get the product out there? And basically, you don't want an angel that expects in 6 months, after having given you money 6 months later, they're going to get that money back. Um, Best case scenario is going to be a few years before you do the exit. Let's forget the actual approval, but a few years before you do the exit. Now, of course, the plus side to an angel is, of course, you can make real money from this, but in addition, you can have a real impact on things like healthcare. So there are clear upsides, but definitely there are angels that don't understand that it's not the same as investing in software. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree, and I think that that expert knowledge of the product and the customer from the angel is what's really expected. So it's just not a question of, well, will they invest? It's the do they understand the kind of the full journey, and are they able to understand that the changes that are taking place in that market, particularly around things like you've mentioned, regulatory, etc. These things aren't static, and they do require deep understanding and deep knowledge.
Yep. No, nothing is more fun than having an investor panic when it turns out that the experiments take longer. They'll push you to make commercial claims. And again, in software, you can make claims because people don't really get hurt if those claims are a little overblown. You don't want to be making those claims, not just because it's the wrong thing to do health-wise, but bodies like the FDA are not going to love that. Um, Also, they may resist raising more money the next round because they'll get diluted and they don't understand why you even need more capital. They gave you something. Just, yeah, it can be an issue.
Right. So we can really lean into your experience here. You're a very experienced founder. So what things should founders really be focused on? What should they really be looking for, Ross?
Sure. Well, first of all, do they have experience in biotech? Have they backed life sciences companies before? That would be really great. And of course, you have somebody you can then ask, how was it working with them? Do they understand, regulation? Do they understand what clinical validation means, technical risk, things like that? Second thing is they have to be nice people. Do they have constructive behavior? Because there's money involved here. Nothing puts a stress on a relationship like money. So again, talk to other people that they have funded. When things go wrong, what is the angel like? Actually, what are you like? Okay. And of course, and I know I'm just echoing what you would say very strongly, you have to have clean terms. Make sure the investment documents are written carefully. Reserve matters are a particular issue. Who owns what? Who gets to make strategic decisions, right? If you issue new shares, who decides that? Selling the company. Maybe you don't want to sell the company. You want to push it further, and your angel's like, nope, I want to cash out. Who actually makes the decision? That should be written down. How about taking on serious debt? Changing your business. Most companies, most successful companies actually pivot from their original idea to sort of go with the market and what it demands. Is there a way that you can do that without an angel blocking that? So basically, will they micromanage it, or will they be a net positive? Because if they're blocking your ordinary operating decisions, it's not good.
Yeah, of course. And the founder trap is to kind of focus on the valuation and forget about the control part, Ross.
Yeah, and we talked about this last
Mm,
time, which is that valuation is what people often talk about, and you may start to obsess over it. But control, remember we talked about this when you can
mhm.
dilute your shares, but doesn't mean you have to give up control and the direction that it goes. And this control is where the damage often happens.
So Ross, what do you think might make an angel walk away from a founder?
Sure. And I've seen this again. I've had good experience with angels, but I have seen this ad nauseum. Um, if your science fails to validate, that of course is a great way to lose them, and that's fair. If they think there's a lack of focus, that you're starting to go all over the place, or maybe they're pushing you to go all over the place. Maybe you don't really have much of a team built there. So maybe you say, oh, we have a platform, it can do this, 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 and this. So maybe you want to do multiple drug screens and that sort of things. This is a red flag, and experienced angels will know this and will start to take slow steps out, back and out the door. Um, if you can't name what your first product will be, what your customer will be for that product, what the regulatory path will be, um, then you're not ready, and that can actually make an angel walk away. And finally, do you have the right team that you're building? Do they have the correct expertise? So if, for example, and I've 100% seen this, if you're a software person and you suddenly decide you're going to do biotech because, AI in healthcare is fashionable, you probably don't really understand what the NHS wants out of it. And I'm pretty sure you've seen what I've seen. This has happened shockingly often. It's really very different, as we discussed last time. Investors will immediately be skeptical, and honestly, they should be.
Yeah, because biology punishes tourists, right?
Biology punishes to. Hey, I like that. Biology punishes. Can we get T-shirts with that?
It's a great idea.
Yeah. So, and also, you have to be careful asking for money before you actually understand what the risk is. So if you're a good founder, you can say with knowledge and honesty, look, here is the risk. Here are the things we're going to do, the experiments we're going to run that will reduce that risk. This is how much money we need to run those experiments, and this is what the company will be worth if we succeed. So if you take that tack, then you're in a sense doing a milestone-driven approach. Then I think angels will be more comfortable with that. If you take the tack of, we got it, it's going to definitely work, look at this great paper we published, angels, good ones, are a little more savvy than that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really strong point, Ross, around funding phases, rather than just looking at the amount to keep something going. What is it you're actually asking for, and what is the out from that next investment round? What is the milestone that you're trying to achieve? I think that's a great point.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it better. Basically, as you say, investors don't want to just fund activity, they want to fund value creation. Hey, everybody. This is your buddy Ross popping in partway through the podcast. So Sandy and I went a little longer than planned this week, so we've decided to split the conversation into 2 episodes. So we're going to finish here, and part 2 will drop next week when Sandy and I move on to talk about accelerators, venture capital, what investors are actually looking for. But before we go, I just wanted to replace the wee bit of joy, which I thought about, with something Sandy said earlier that I really liked and just wanted to riff on for just 1 minute. And that is that biology punishes tourists, which I kind of like that phrase. I have to get a t-shirt. But occasionally biology gives you a large hint. That's what I wanted to talk about. So let's talk about Pfizer and their development original development of a then compound called sildenafil as a treatment for angina. So the idea was to relax blood vessels and improve blood flow to the heart. Seems very simple. They tested it. Unfortunately, it didn't work so great. The heart was not very impressed. It wasn't very changed. But the men in those early trials began to report a different effect, erections. Now, normally a side effect is something you try to remove. In this case, the side effect turns out to be the actual result, the gold of it. And so at that point, Pfizer had a choice. And I actually kind of remember this. I was in St. Louis where some of the trials were happening. Some of the early work in rats were happening where they also noticed this. So Pfizer could remain loyal to the original plan and keep pushing it. And I think there were people that really went after that and tried to make sildenafil into a heart drug. But they paid attention. They changed erections, and they developed it for erectile dysfunction, now known as Viagra. And of course, Viagra became one of the best known medicines in the world and one of the most successful of all time. And I should say the original science, it was not wrong. Sildenafil really does affect blood vessels, and it was later used to treat pulmonary hypertension. So the lesson is not that the scientists failed. They were simply wrong about where the most useful biology would be, and you can't predict that. You just have to pay close attention. And so scientists and founders, and me included, often fall in love with the question that we first start with. But sometimes, if you're paying attention, the data will take you someplace else that can also be useful, unless you're not paying attention, and then biology indeed punishes tourists. But every now and then, it rewards people who are paying attention. In this case, very famously, it was not very subtle. So that's my story. Please, everybody, keep the heed. See y'all next week for the second half of our BioFounders Playbook, How to Raise Funding in Scotland. Bye.
Yeah, see the vision clear. We're here to run the long game. Blueprint set, no fear. Playing out the long game, the long game.